Welcome back. If you're just joining, this is Daybreak, of course, on Trust Television, and this is the newspaper review segment. I have a copy of the Daily Trust with me, as is customary, and we'll start with the front page. Lead story there says, dialogue with protest organizers. Opposition reps tell federal government. The question now is, how do you dialogue with organizers of a protest whose face you don't know? Well, let's hope they're able to do that. But writers there say demonstration may compromise peace. This is according to the government. Tinubu needs more time. Oba of Benin governors speak. Read more on this story on page 4. Also, federal government resumes trial of over 300 terrorism suspects. Page 6 has that story. Borno leaders demand Ndume's reinstatement as Senate whip. This is coming on the heels of his unceremonious removal as the Senate whip following certain statements he had made previously. Of course, this was orchestrated by the leadership of the APC. Also, pastor defiles 14-year-old student in Ondo. That story is on page 27, and I understand that the said pastor has been remanded in a correctional facility. But read more on page 27. Top of the page says, subscribers, telcos disagree over data billing. Dangote refinery, man warns against demarketing local investments. Reconsider 70% forex windfall tax. Stakeholders tell federal government. This story is on page 23. Now, these are some of the stories on the front page of the Daily Trust. We now go to the Punch newspaper. Top of the page says mayhem as Fubara Wike supporters clash in Rivers. Of course, this is on the heels of, the controversy between the infighting between the governor and, his successor, who is currently the minister of the FCT, Nyesom Wike. Beside that, Dangote local refineries to end fuel importation, page 29. Well, how would they do that if the local refineries are complaining that they're not even getting crude allocations? But page 29 has more of that story, and you could read. And just beside the masthead there, we see federal government scholars decry 56% allowance cut, fear expulsion. Lead story, governors, ministers meet today to stop hunger protest. Reps ask federal government to embrace dialogue as Tinubu sues for peace. Abiodun, Uzodinma, Bauchi government condemned planned rally. Oba of Benin urges patience. Pilot hospitalized as plane crash kills 18 in Nepal. Unfortunate developments there. We could see pictorials from the crash site. And below that story, we see foreign education forex allocation tumbles 83%, according to the CBN. Residents groan over Lagos Air Force Base blackout. And finally, on the Punch, Oyo fresh selection process for Alaafin, page 15 has that story. We now go to the Nation newspaper. Top of the page says, most wanted Lagos drug baron nabbed after gun duel. The Nation has that story at the top of its page. Southeast Development Commission excites Ohaneze governors. The news page 5 has that story. Also, Ibadan Airport upgrade for completion in 18 months. Trial of 300 terrorism suspects resume. And also, we see the lead story, no to planned protests similar to NSAS governors warn. Don't overheat the polity. Oba of Benin, give government more time. Seeming like more and more leaders are beginning to speak against the upcoming or forthcoming protests come August 1. Labour Party accuses its elected members of being behind crisis. This story is on the belt. An Edo 2024 budget will fully be implemented. Sanwo-Olu seeks more investment in IT, healthcare, and transportation. And below the pictorial there on the belt, livestock reforms panel report on farmer-herder conflict ready in 2 weeks. Well, as the government continues to contend with these developments, they are also trying their best to see, that they bring an end to the farmer-herder crisis in Nigeria, which has in one way impacted, food production and has in another way impacted the cost of food prices here in Nigeria. Joining me now to provide perspectives on this development, I have Nasiru Lawan. He is the editor at Dateline Nigeria. Editor, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Of course, I would start with your take on the August 1 protest. So the government has been trying the best that it can to demarket the protest while also calling for the leaders or the figureheads of the protest to come, to the table for a dialogue. How do you see all of this playing out?
Well, our leaders used to think that, the youths can only make noise, on social media. But this time around, they can see the determination. Yes, the determination to actually go to the streets to protest, all these issues of hardship and what have you. And the government has succeeded in a way, the fact that, they called out some of the leaders of the opposition. And here you have the Daily Trust, telling you that the opposition lawmakers are telling the government to dialogue with the planned protesters. But the problem is, these are people that you don't even know. We don't know who the actual leaders of the protests, are going to be. Because if we have names we can, attach to this protest, probably we can engage them to know exactly what they want, how they want the government to go about it. I remember even in Kaduna, one of the, popular clerics in Nigeria, Sheikh Ahmed Gumi, also said the same thing, that probably they should extend the beginning to maybe January 2025. By then, they must have, decided on their leadership and what have you. Because if you allow this thing to start without leaders, then this is where the problem will come in. Hoodlums and people that have sinister motives will now use the opportunity to enter into it and cause chaos.
But don't you think these so-called leaders or figureheads are just trying to be careful? Because this is not the first time we've seen protests being held in Nigeria, especially protests of the kind of caliber that I imagine that it's going to be. And we've seen how in time past we've seen clampdown or unexpected arrest of these so-called leaders of protest. But then again, when we talk about this protest, what comes to mind is the End SARS protest. But for me, what comes to mind is the Occupy Nigeria protest in the early 2010s, and how figureheads of those protests are the ones who are currently in government, but they were given an opportunity to voice their concerns, especially on the leadership and the administration as it were at that time. Why are they finding it difficult to receive the same appeal?
Well, even at the moment, I saw the Minister of Information, trying to say that the Tinubu administration will not stop Nigerians from, their right to protest. But on the other hand, they also have a responsibility to maintain law and order. And you know what that means. When government starts telling you, to maintain law and order, probably they are trying to, they may have to clamp down on the protest. So honestly, like you said, I think the government should allow, the people to voice their grievances. Let them come to the streets. Allow them to do that. But then it's your responsibility to keep the law and order, like you said. The peace. That's why we have security agencies. So even without protest, whatever thing is happening in the country, it's your responsibility to make sure that it does not get out of hand. Indeed. But honestly, if you ask me again, I will say the protesters should also consider the fact that it's not only the government, that will suffer when you take to the street to do all this. So maybe what we should be thinking of is how to hold the government accountable, without necessarily endangering the lives of ordinary Nigerians. Because if we claim to be fighting on their behalf, then we should also try not to get them affected by whatever action we are trying to take.
All right, Editor, now, aside all of these developments, we've seen on the front page of the Daily Trust that the federal government has resumed trial of over 300 terrorism suspects. This is coming at a time where a lot of Nigerians have gotten used to repentant terrorists, repentant bandits, who are rehabilitated and reintegrated back into the communities that they once terrorized. How do you think Nigerians will take this development as it is?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is why the pause in the first place? Because, you have your cases against these so-called non-state actors. So what stops you from continuing with the prosecution? At a point, they were complaining about, resources, even how to fund it. The fact that, they also want to do some of the things behind closed doors because you don't want people coming out to testify against terrorists because you don't know.
Sorry to interject. Will it cost more to try a terrorist than it would cost to rehabilitate one? In your mind, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's better we go ahead with the prosecution, because if you succeed on the part of on the side of the prosecution, you now stop others from trying to follow the same path. But if you end up rehabilitating one, then people will say, okay, let's try this. At least if we don't succeed, the government will end up rehabilitating us. So I don't think it's even something that we should even consider. Let's go ahead with the prosecution so long we have our facts, against evidence against these people. Honestly, we should go ahead with the prosecution so that, like I said, it will serve as a deterrent to those who will want to follow the same path.
Indeed. I do hope that the government does well in terms of this trial to ensure that families who were terrorized by these non-state actors, especially in northeast Nigeria, find succor. And talking about northeast Nigeria, particularly Maiduguri, we've seen Borno leaders demand the reinstatement of Ndume as the Senate whip. What do you make of this?
Maybe they are only appealing, media and their headlines.
Okay,
because if you are demanding,
you are an editor, so you have an understanding.
Yeah. So if they are actually, the first thing they should know is this thing is not a right. Simply because you are a senator does not mean automatically you become
a member of the
chief
Senate.
It's the Senate that determines that, and this is something that had to do with your party. Your party wrote the leadership of the Senate to say that, okay, so person is no longer our candidate for that position, to the extent that they were even advising him to, join the opposition if that's what he wants to do.
I heard the SDP even reached out.
Yes, but, honestly, we should know. It's because he doesn't have the opportunity to voice these concerns, the right quarters.
Yes, indeed.
If he is able to do that, I don't think he will want to come to the media, to the floor of the Senate, voicing out all these frustrations. But the fact that this is the only means he has, of reaching the people, that's why he had to toe that line. So the leaders of Southern Borno should know that even though this guy is a senator, it's not like a birthright.
It's not a right
for him to become the chief whip. It's for his colleagues to determine that.
All right, editor. Conclusively, I really want to ask your opinion as to whether you have concerns that this forthcoming protest might end up being counterproductive.
I certainly do, because anything that has no leadership, then you can't predict what is likely to happen in the end. If we are to have leaders, those that we can engage, so that to know exactly what they want, because right now there is no even consensus. Yes, Nigerians are facing difficulties, but even the consensus, to know that this is exactly what we want the government to address first and foremost. We don't have that because of lack of leadership. So I don't think allowing them to go to the street, will
solve all of the problems.
No, I don't think so.
All right, editor has spoken his mind with regards to the developments and his worry over the direction that this protest might take, especially as there's no figurehead to direct, the protest. But then again, it's been an interesting conversation with editor Malam Nasiru Lawal, the editor at Dateline Nigeria. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
And with that wraps up Daybreak this morning. I hope you enjoyed the show from the beginning at 8 a.m. up until this point. If you failed or missed any part of the program, do not forget you can follow us across all of our social platforms and catch our live stream on YouTube to catch up on whatever that you missed. And for me, is thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Up next is 360 Sports with Adeni Ajishafe. My name is Sagir Ibrahim. Have a great day.